Hello, Star Trek fans, and welcome to the Rebinge Deep Space Nine podcast. My name is Kim.
And my name is James.
And we're watching Star Trek Deep Space Nine from the beginning, one episode at a time. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we are on Season 1, Episode 10, entitled The Nagus. This episode first aired March 21st, 1993.
Wow, so we actually made it to 10 episodes.
We've made it to episode number 10.
This is another episode that I remembered pretty well.
I don't remember this at all. I don't think I saw it.
Had you given up by this point?
I think I gave up during one of the creeping episodes. All right, before we dig into this episode, is there anything you want to say about the previous podcast?
Nope. Other than I enjoyed it, and there seems to be this strange consensus that it's the worst episode of the season.
Or of all time.
Yeah, I really don't get it. It wasn't terrible.
The way that you analyzed it really changed my view of it, because I just didn't think about it that way. I was really looking at it in such a different, shallow way, and you were like really thinking about it deeply, and I could see if you looked at it that way, you would have a different opinion.
Okay.
That's fine.
Well, that is the point of this podcast.
That's exactly why we're talking about it, and we don't talk about the shows outside of the podcast. We only talk about it when we're on the podcast. That way, our interactions are fresh and new to each other.
Although I really, really want to talk about the show.
You try. Nope, save it for the podcast. One of the things I wanted to talk about from the last podcast is we did mention that we hadn't seen Jake since the school episode, but that wasn't quite right. Jake actually was in the episode called Babel, so I was off by an episode.
Close enough.
I just don't want to get letters. That's not true. I do want to get letters. But I don't want to get letters saying, oh, you're such an idiot. All right, let's look into this episode. Are you ready?
I am ready.
Okay, the cold open is a quick view of the outside of the station. I know it's your favorite thing.
Yes, it is.
Then we see a Ferengi coming into the station through an airlock, and some very ominous music plays, so we know he's up to no good.
Well, he's a Ferengi, and they're pretty much always up to no good.
Right. He waves behind him that the coast is clear, and we see a dude in bright purple hair. The show loves purple.
Color of the show.
And certainly every time we have visitors, they are wearing purple in some way. So he's helping someone who's covered in a kind of bluish purple robe and a hood. You can't see who that is, but it's a very height-challenged individual. And he is carrying a staff with the head of a Ferengi on it. So I assume he is some very old Ferengi.
It could be Master Yogurt on a merchandising trip.
Then the tone of the music changes and we jump to Jake's bedroom. And he's got a baseball mitt and baseball on his bed. I'm still waiting to see some baseball on this show. Hasn't happened yet.
There will be baseball, trust me.
Jake is gathering up a bunch of blue data pads. I think it's his homework. And he drops a couple on the floor. And when he does that, we see that he's outgrowing his clothes already. And maybe they didn't think about that carefully when they were packing to join the station.
He probably told Jake, there'll be lots of clothing stores on the station.
God. Well, there is one. Garrick could make him some new pants. Yeah, again, we haven't seen Garrick.
We'll come on to my theory on that.
Then he grabs a shoe from under his bed and he tries to put his right shoe on his left foot. And I wrote down, maybe he's not as smart as I thought he was. Sisko appears saying he has a terrific surprise. He says, we're going to Bajor for the start of the Gratitude Festival. Well, that sounds like a drag for a teenager. What's worse than living in a flea market?
Touring Bajoran antique stores?
Jake says, what's that? And he goes back to gathering up his books and his data pads, but he's still only got one shoe on. Sisko says this is the biggest Bajoran holiday of the year, and Major Kira told him it's spectacular. And then he says we can visit the fire caverns that you've been wanting to see while we're there. Fires in caverns? It sounds dangerous.
I believe this is the first mention of the fire caverns. Now, these will be important later in the show.
Oh.
Well, later in the series.
Really? He says, we'll leave this afternoon and we'll be gone for 3 days. And then Jake's tone kind of changes and he's like, do I have to go?
He's a total teenager.
And he orders an orange juice from the replicator. I think we're supposed to realize that he's getting ready for school.
Yeah.
Jake says he has plans with Nog tomorrow. There's an Andorian freighter due for a maintenance check. And then he finds his other shoe, which I don't know why I'm so obsessed with his shoes. I have all this in my notes. Anyway, he puts on his other shoe.
I think they're just trying to show he's disorganized and rushing.
I guess so, yeah. He says the freighter is supposed to have a shipment of anti-grav tractors, and he wants to see one. Did you write that down, that it was a tractor?
Yes. And I have no idea why they're interested in tractors.
I don't either. I feel like you could just go to the holosuite and see one.
Yeah.
Although maybe the kids aren't allowed on the holosuite, because on this thing, it's not like the Enterprise. They have to actually go to the bar and pay Quark, and they seem to only be for disgusting purposes.
Yeah, holosuites are not appropriate for children, or sanitary for that matter.
Oh. Sisko is hurt that he wants to hang out in a cargo bay looking at tractors instead of hanging out in the fire caverns with his old man. Jake finally has both shoes on and his metal school bag over his shoulder, and he leaves saying, yeah, but Nog is my friend. And off he goes to school.
I assume that was just an excuse so he could hang out with Nog.
Oh, you don't think the tractors were real? Although, wait, we never see them.
Oh yeah, I think the tractors are real. He just wanted an excuse to hang out.
Well, but he seems like he was interested at first until he realized he was going to be gone for 3 days. And then I thought, oh, well. Because at first he's like, oh, when are we doing that? And he says, we leave this afternoon and we'll be gone for 3 days. Yeah. And he goes, oh, do I have to go? That's how. So I read it as, oh, well, I have plans tomorrow or whatever.
Oh, I didn't pick that up at all. I thought Jake didn't seem very interested from the start.
Okay. Which makes no sense because he likes Bajoran girls. And I'm sure that place would be full of Bajoran girls. Now we go to Quark's. And Quark is talking to a female Bajoran, I believe. He's pouring her a drink. And she's wearing a purple dress. I'm just going to keep mentioning all the purple things in this episode.
Purple is a very important color.
He's saying that customer satisfaction is our primary concern. And then he shoos her back to the Dabo table just as Ram is walking by rather sheepishly. And he grabs him and says, that lady misplaced a fat currency pouch, which is, I guess, a futuristic word for purse. And you found it and returned it to her intact? Yes, brother, Ram says. I was dazzled by her beauty.
Oh, Ram, I don't think that's very Ferengi.
Quark calls him a worthless, tiny-eared fool. And I had frozen the screen, and the two of them were looking at each other, and their ears were exactly the same size.
Yes, I noticed that as well. Rom's ears are not smaller than Quark's.
It's just an insult, I guess. Then he makes him recite the first rule of acquisition, which is, once you have their money, you never give it back.
I like the way Rom recited it in a very rote manner, as if it had just been drilled into him over years.
Well, sure, especially if it's the first one.
Yeah, he doesn't seem to quote it with any great enthusiasm.
No. Quark says you can ponder the meaning of this rule while polishing every rail in the place. Now get out of my sight. Then we see Nog, and he's stacking up what looks like beer glasses and the blue data pads like Jake. So I guess that's his homework. I'm not sure that's a sanctioned use of your homework.
I believe that's a Ferengi sanctioned use. It's okay.
Wasn't that what he was doing?
Yeah, he was just goofing off, avoiding any real work.
Yeah.
And avoiding the homework too.
Yeah, and then Ram comes up behind him and startles him, and he knocks the whole thing over. And then Ram says, is this what they teach you at that human school? Sloth and indolence?
Well, Ram shows he can be pretty eloquent in his criticism.
Apparently. I didn't know what indolence meant. I had to look it up. Apparently, it's just another word for lazy. No, Father, Nog says. Then Ram tells him he'll be polishing every rail in the place tonight. Seems right. Pass your work off.
That does seem like a very Ferengi thing.
Yeah. Now we go to the promenade, and we see the three people from the very beginning. So there's the short Ferengi guy.
Aren't they all short?
And then there's also the one in the bluish-purple robe who you can't see. And then there's the purple-haired guy who's enormous.
Yeah.
I looked it up. This guy's listed as Tiny Ron, and he is 7 feet tall.
Yeah, it's not just visual effect. The guy is huge.
Yeah.
Now, in the opening overview shot of this scene, have we seen that fish skeleton before?
Yes, we've definitely seen it before because I had it in my notes. What the heck is that thing? I mean, it looks like a giant fish, but it's apparently not quite a fish. Something else. Maybe it's a fish from Bajor.
Perhaps it's Bajor in modern art.
Okay, well, it could be. Now we jump back into the bar, and Quark is talking to Morn, and they sort of come in on him telling the end of a joke. And he says, and so the Andorian says, your brother, I thought it was your wife. And then he repeats it, and then the two of them laugh, and we see a close-up on Morn. That guy is ugly and surprisingly hairy. And also his outfit in this scene is like a giant puffer jacket.
Wasn't that style of jacket really fashionable in the early 90s? I'm going to have to look that up now.
And he can only have one constant facial expression because of the mask. So the laugh was kind of like,
I expect showing any kind of emotion or facial expression is almost impossible. I mean, you've got your eyes to work with and maybe a little body language, but it's going to be hard.
Yeah, and this is the most we've really done with him. We have sort of a close-up on him, and he's apparently a part of this conversation, and Quark is telling him a joke.
So in summary, we've determined Morn likes a joke, likes a drink, likes to talk to Quark, and also likes to join in a mob if there is one.
Then the three mystery figures enter the bar behind Quark, and one of them says, I'm looking for Quark. I'm Krax, and this is my father, Grand Nagus Zek. Quark really dramatically turns around, and the giant pulls the hood off the hooded figure to reveal what looks like the oldest Ferengi in the galaxy, and his head is like an aged tree trunk.
That is some great makeup.
Quark jumps to his feet and grabs the guy's staff and kisses the little Ferengi head, and he asks if the Grand Nagus is here on business or pleasure. Krax asks if there is a difference, and Quark says, no, of course not.
The Grand Nagus in Quark's bar? Inconceivable.
Krax says his father will reveal the purpose of his visit when he sees fit. For now, he needs a holosuite. He's heard some of Quark's programs are quite alluring. Quark says that they are, but he also says they might be too energetic for him, which, gross. Quark says he has a list of 5 of his favorites. Maybe the Grand Nagus could choose one. And Crack says he's going to try all 5 of them. Then they show the tree head guy up close, and you hear this like really high-pitched cackle.
Yes.
I didn't get that was coming from him because it didn't look like he was the one laughing. There's like this cackle and his unmoving face.
Yeah, it sounded like bad post-dubbing where someone decided to add the effect later, but it didn't match what was going on screen.
Like, it was so strange. I mean, a lot of stuff just happened, and now we get the theme finally.
Right. That was a big and long open.
Yeah, it was long, and there were lots of different scenes and people involved. Normally, it's just whoever the main character is, and that's it. After the theme song, we have crazy kids in a classroom, so we've gone back to school, but no Keiko. We have Miles. He comes in, finally, and he apologized for being late because he was off fixing some broken crap somewhere. I didn't write down what he was fixing because it's just so many things.
Now, along with fixing everything, he has to be a teacher. He's really got to learn how to delegate.
But his sleeves are not rolled up, so he might be lying. He may have just overslept.
Oh, good point. I didn't notice that.
Right? On the screen behind him, it says comparative xenobiology. That seems like quite an advanced topic for these children.
They're all smart kids.
Maybe they use that room for something else when the children aren't in there.
Kids are all smart in the future. I mean, Geordie said he learned about warp drive when he was in high school.
They don't look that smart, but okay. Miles yells at all the kids to settle down, and he says, we only have 2 more weeks to get through before Keiko gets back from Earth. So apparently she's there for the entire 100th year of her mother's life.
Okay, well, here's a theory about that. Keiko is missing. Garak is missing. The 2 of them have actually just gone off together.
Oh my gosh, I hope not.
That was more of a conspiracy theory than an analysis, really.
Yeah. Miles tells everyone to get out their homework pads, so those must be those little blue things. He says the older kids were supposed to write an essay on ethics, which is a little more realistic than xenobiology. And Nog starts sinking down in his seat. So, of course, Miles calls on him because that's exactly how you get called on, especially on television shows.
A little bit of classic TV tropery there.
Nog says that his pad was stolen in Quark, so I guess we lost the Find My iPad technology in the future. He says that some Vulcans were there and they must have stolen his iPad. And Miles is like, Vulcans stole your homework.
I love Colm Meaney's expression in this scene. I mean, how he portrays that he's clearly not comfortable in this situation.
Yes.
And the way he reacts to Nog's obviously outlandish story just really works.
Yeah, an obvious lie. And he's not used to this because he's just got one very small child.
Right, yeah.
Nog is wearing a colorful purple sweater. The only thing I like about the Ferengi so far is their love of well-tailored, colorful clothing.
The Ferengi do have a very natty dress sense. I wonder if it's a way they project an image or aura of success through their clothing choices.
I do like when Miles asks him why Vulcans would steal his homework, and Nog says, ethics, which elicits a lot of laughter from his classmates.
Have they never heard of Robo-Vulcans?
And then he doubles down on the lie, and he says that Jake was there. You can ask Jake what happened.
Ooh.
And Jake, not wanting to hurt his friend, says he was there. And Miles says, fine, have the essay in tomorrow. And then Nog smiles at Jake. And Jake looks really crestfallen, like he knows lying doesn't lead to good things.
Jake does seem very conflicted about being untruthful.
Yeah.
And I think another part of this is Ferengi culture, where being untruthful can be a way to success.
Yeah. In fact, we talk about that a little bit later.
Yeah, right.
With the Ferengi, right? When they've got that little council that they pull together. Then we go to Quark's and we see the giant standing outside of the holosuite. The picture was a little fuzzy, but I think he was polishing the head of that staff. And we hear that freaky cackling again. I guess that's the Nagus behind the door. So these rooms aren't soundproof. That is truly horrifying.
Yes.
I mean, it's bad enough I have to know what's going on in there because we've covered it. But do I have to hear it too?
You mean the massage programs?
Ugh. Quark wonders how long the Nagus is going to be hogging the suite, and Krax is like, he will not be disturbed. Quark is, fine, and he goes around a customer to talk to Rom, and the customer that he goes around, wearing purple.
So we should keep a counter for the number of purple outfits in the series?
Rom says he's never been so proud as to have the Grand Nagus under our roof. And Quark says, well, hopefully you can live on pride because that's all we'll have left when he's through with us. Quark is assuming that he came all this way to buy him out for a fraction of what the bar is worth. Rom says just refuse to sell it, and Quark hits him with his elbow and says the Nagus doesn't take no for an answer. So, I mean, I don't understand why he would even be able to force him to do it.
That's my question too. Why would you not be able to refuse the Nagus? Is it because he's a cultural symbol that you simply cannot refuse?
Yeah, maybe.
Is it something along the lines of he would ruin your business? He's, massively influential, so you wouldn't be able to do business with any other Ferengi.
I assume it's something to do with that.
Yeah. Or is it down to, finally, straight intimidation? If you refuse the Nagus, you end up falling out of an airlock.
Okay.
I'm going to just make the assumption it's a combination of all three.
Meanwhile, the disgusting tree trunk comes down the stairs, grabbing an orange jug from Cracks and glugging it. Now his robes look purple. They look kind of bluish purple at the beginning, but now he's all purple. And the giant with purple hair is wearing purple. This is the purplest of all episodes we've had so far in the first 10. It makes no sense that I didn't watch the show. There's baseball, everything's purple. These are like my favorite things.
I'm just going to blame Bashir.
Well, it's probably just Bashir. Exactly. That's funny. That's exactly what I thought. It's like, yeah. The Nagus finally speaks and saying, "Good program." And as soon as you hear his voice, you realize it's Wallace Shawn from The Princess Bride and the T-Rex from Toy Story.
Wait for me.
Crack says, "My father requires rest." And Quark mutters, "I would imagine." Gross. He says, "Feel free to use my own brother's quarters." And then he asks what else he can do. And then Nagus says, "Invite me to dinner."
That's just priceless. Giving up Rom's quarters.
Yes.
He is really pretty mean to Rom.
Well, because he goes, "Use my own brother's quarters." Yes. Now we go to Ops, and Miles is fixing something. Sisko appears to say that something else is broken on top of the thing that he's already fixing. Miles must hate this place.
It's a punishment posting for Miles.
Everything is always broken. And not only is Miles fixing everything, he's also being the teacher at the school. And he's the bellhop, and he's the greeter at the Jiffy Lube. Miles is everything. They should rename this Deep Space O'Brien.
I like the way Miles was the one in the conduit of the hole and the assistant's just standing there.
Yeah.
Shouldn't those roles be reversed and Miles pointing out, yeah, fix it?
I think Miles is either the worst delegator or all of his NPCs are useless. They actually don't know how to fix anything. They're just there to hold things and hand him tools.
Miles has just been assigned F-Troop.
Oh God, probably. They've all failed at their other assignments.
They've probably been told it's a special promotion to work on Deep Space Nine.
Sisko asks how school is going, and Miles says they're muddling through, though he's counting the days for Keiko to get back. I'm sure he is. It seems like maybe somebody else could chip in a little. I don't know why it has to be Miles teaching. Maybe because it's Keiko's school, and so he feels responsible.
He's being a very responsible husband.
Yeah, I guess. Sisko asks if Jake is behaving, and Miles says he's a fine lad. But if he were my son, I'd find him a friend other than Nog. He's a bad influence. And Sisko's like, well, that's easier said than done. If I try to separate them now, it would be me versus Nog, and I won't win. Sisko is pretty wise in this parenting area. I quite like that about him in this episode. I feel like there are opportunities for him to really be a stereotype here, especially in this episode, not necessarily just in this scene, but in this whole episode.
Oh, yeah.
And he's not. He clearly loves the kid and he wants to do right by him, and it's very sweet.
I do like how it shows a very positive father and son relationship without it resorting to being heavily cliched.
Yes.
And at the same time, Sisko is showing he's coming to the realization that his son is a teenager and how best to cope with that.
But we don't see a lot of this in Star Trek, this kind of parenting. Sure, we saw the Crushers, but there wasn't a lot about parenting.
Yeah.
Like a lot of times we will say jokingly, oh, that's the lesson for this episode, or that's the lesson for this show.
Very true.
I don't feel like this show is trying to teach me a lesson about parenthood. I think it feels organic and it feels realistic that this is just a father who's trying to do right by his kid. It's written well and it's acted well. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's why I like this scene. Because you have two really good actors, and I feel the tone of the scene changes as it progresses.
Yeah.
It starts off with Miles and Sisko talking very formally, and also the body language I felt is very formal. And as the scene progresses, it becomes very informal, and Miles's voice and tone totally changes. So it ends with a scene of two parents talking, and I thought it just worked so well.
Yeah. Okay, now we go to dinner at Quark's, and the giant is eating maggots with chopsticks.
They're probably high in protein, though.
Gross. He is a taste tester, I guess, for the Nagus. He says the tube grubs are chilled to perfection. So not only are they maggots,
Delicious.
but they're chilled, which is so gross. They're eating at a big table with a giant rotating serving station in the middle, which is handy, but also in the way of every conversation. I don't know if you noticed that. They're constantly leaning to the side to talk around it, which I thought was hilarious.
Maybe that's just the style of the cinematographer. Remember the Dax and Sisko conversation through the bookshelves?
Did you go back and watch that?
I did.
It's funny, right?
The director likes people talking through things.
Ugh, that was so weird. Directing choice. So the Nagus said he ran into Quark's cousin Barbo recently. And Ram says he thought he was still in the detention center somewhere. As he says this, he takes a bite out of something that looks like a plastic catfish. It's clearly not food, and he does not eat it. And the bits of plastic are like hanging out of his mouth after he bites it. It was hilarious.
A low-cost food prop.
Oh, man. Nagus says that Cousin Barbo told him how the two of you sold defective warp drives to the Taharan government. Very clever. And Quark says, they're a gullible people.
I'm guessing that's how the Ferengi rate other races on a gullibility scale.
1 to 5. Nagus says he also told me how you ratted him out to the authorities and kept all the profits. And Quark refers to the 6th rule of acquisition. Never allow family to stand in the way of opportunity.
Lovely.
And the Nagus says, well, you've done well for yourself, Quark. It was a stroke of genius to open a bar so close to a stable wormhole. Crack says, but he didn't even know the wormhole existed. And the Nagus says, but that's what makes it so impressive. He has the instinct, the ears to do it. You could learn from his example.
Once again, we see a reference to ears. Clearly, they are very important in Ferengi society.
And also, I'm pretty sure that Krax is not thrilled with this comparison and how Quark is smart. It's obviously like a father telling him, look, you're not as smart as this guy.
Well, I think this is part of the arc of this episode. It's contrasting the relationship between the Nagus and his son with the relationship between Sisko and Jake.
Oh, that's not at all what I was thinking. That's very interesting.
Well, that's what I picked up by this point in the show. There's a difficult relationship between the Nagus and his son.
Yeah.
Like a few seconds before when he moved the table and the Nagus barked at him, I'm not done yet.
Yes, I did notice that. I mean, you're totally right. There's these two parallel stories going on about fatherhood, essentially.
Yeah.
I was thinking that this was just part of the overall arc of how he treats his son and what he's trying to do for his son.
Yeah.
Because that comes out sort of at the end. And I didn't link all of that together, but you're right. Ding, the light bulb just turned on over my head. I don't know if you can see it.
I'll have to check.
Then the Nagus calls for the boy to bring him, I guess, a toothpick. Nog is standing in the background and brings him like a box of something, and he takes it out and he's picking at his teeth with it. And Nog is annoyed and he wants to go and do his homework. The Nagus is horrified to find out that he is going to a school, let alone a human school taught by a female. Ram is really upset that Nog let this out of the bag because that was supposedly a big secret, I guess.
Yeah.
Ram is annoyed and tells him to get out. And I thought, why doesn't he just cite another rule of acquisition, number 74, which is knowledge equals profit?
That one hadn't been written yet.
Well, actually, you're right. It hadn't been written yet because that comes from a Voyager episode and Voyager hasn't aired yet.
The Nagus does seem pretty worried about this, though.
Yes, and it seems like they have no respect for gaining an education. Ram says it's the Federation do-gooders making the kids go to school. That was when I wrote down how funny it was that they were looking around the serving station to talk to each other because Ram is leaning way to the side to talk to the Nagus.
Yep.
The Nagus now says, most distressing.
Shouldn't that be inconceivable?
How many times do you think you're going to use that joke? That's 2.
I'm done. Possibly.
Then the Nagus says he's come to ask a favor of Quark. He needs his bar and services as host for an important conference he wants to hold tomorrow.
He was just picking on Quark at that point. The way he said it was to torture him.
He was, because Quark was waiting for some really bad news. So short notice for a conference tomorrow, but yet again, we have to use Quark's bar for something.
Oh yeah, it is the center of the universe.
I don't know. The Deep Space Nine is supposed to be so massive, but it just seems like it's so tiny.
Limited set budget.
Quark says he would be honored. He says the conference is about the future of Ferengi business interests in the Gamma Quadrant. We get more of a close-up of the tree head guy, Nagus, and you can see all this fuzz in his ears, which I'm glad it wasn't in super high def because it was bad enough fuzzy.
He needs an ear trimmer.
Oh.
Maybe there's good profit to be made in selling Ferengi ear trimmers.
I bet they sell ear trimmers in the flea market.
Oh, you know it.
Quark dabs his mouth at this point, which I wouldn't normally put into my notes, except he was using a very sparkly purple napkin. This episode should have been called Purple.
Wallace Shawn is a freaking gem. He manages to make the Nagus character both funny and malevolent at the same time.
And it's funny with his voice and how he is so recognized with the Princess Bride.
Yes.
That it's really hard not to just see the same exact character, even though he's buried under that tree trunk makeup.
Definitely.
Now we go back to Ops, and Kira is announcing that a Ferengi transport has arrived at Docking Bay 5. Sisko notes that this is the third Ferengi ship in the last 18 hours, and Dax from the background says, maybe it's Quark's birthday.
Was she being serious?
I don't know. I laughed so hard. It's so ridiculous. And Kira says, lock up the silverware.
Now, that doesn't sound like a bad idea.
I don't know why, but the birthday thing, that was so funny. Dax has this funny way of saying things where she's really serious, yet the thing that she says is just so goofy. Oh my gosh. I laughed. Yeah.
The delivery of that line just made it. I assume it was a joke.
Oh, it was great.
I like that Kira seemed to have a handle on the Ferengi. Lock up the valuables.
Yes. Well, she was the one who said Quark was having a party and she was like, oh, you cheated your 1,000th customer. Something like that.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, Sisko calls Odo, who is in the promenade up on the second level, watching little Ferengi run all over.
Yeah.
And Odo says, I'm already on it.
That does sound like Odo. But I will point out he missed the Soldiers of Fortune a couple of weeks ago. One of them was even dressed like a pirate.
But there were all these other things going on in that episode. Odo was very distracted.
True.
Now we go to Quark's, and it looks like they're in a special meeting room, but as the camera kind of turned later in the scene, we see that we're actually just at the bar again, and he's closed the bar. The room is very dimly lit. I guess the Ferengi like it dark. But did you notice all the purple accents? There was purple everywhere.
Purple is the Ferengi color.
But they also like other bright colors, but purple is big.
Definitely.
Krax is complaining about the seating chart. Morn appears in the doorway, and Quark chases him away, saying, this is a private meeting. Where is Morn supposed to go when Quark's is closed? I mean, when it was closed for Dax's hearing, Morn was there.
I did like it when he was shooing him away.
Yeah, he's like, shoo, shoo. It was sad. Then a bully Ferengi is yelling at Krax, accusing him of hiding in his father's shadow. Finally, the Nagus arrives, and now we can kind of see that they've just stuffed the conference table into Quark's. They also have these really uncomfortable-looking chairs.
Oh, I'm pretty sure the uncomfortable chairs were deliberately chosen by the Nagus. Did you notice how Grohl didn't seem very deferential to the Grand Nagus until he arrived? Then he was bickering with Grax, which sounded more like they were just making threats at each other. I assume we're seeing this as like a microcosm of the pettiness and rivalry that passes for Ferengi politics.
Well, they seem to butter each other up when it's required, right? Or when they think that it will get them something. So I just think they do whatever it takes to suit them. I mean, if you read the rules of acquisition, that's pretty much what it's all about. You can pretty much step on anyone and do anything if it means that you'll profit from it.
Yeah, that's definitely true. So another small observation is, why do some of the Ferengi have head coverings at the back?
Like Quark doesn't, but Rom does, and Nog does.
And also Grax and some of the other high-ranking Ferengi.
Yeah, I looked it up somewhere along the way, but it doesn't seem like it's really ever addressed as something. I know there were some questions about, is it like a family thing? One of the things I read was it may have just been that it was a little bit easier on the makeup crew if they just had to put that thing around the back instead of making the full complicated head on everyone.
Oh, yeah. And probably a time management issue as well. If you've got anything that can help you shortcut getting 8 or 10 people into Ferengi makeup, that would probably be a big help for the production.
Yeah, there's a lot of Ferengi in this episode. Yeah. Now we go to the promenade, and Nog is sitting up on the second level, and he's kind of sulking. He's like got his head resting on the railing and his feet. He's sitting down and his feet are hanging over the edge. Jake arrives and asks where he was this morning because he missed school. And Nog looks happy just for a moment when Jake arrives. And then all of a sudden he's sad. And he says he's done with school. He says, I don't have to attend those boring classes anymore. And Jake, being the smart kid that he is, says, was this your father's idea? But Nog says it's the right decision in a defiant Ferengi tone. He says he doesn't belong there. School is a waste of time for Ferengi because there's no profit in it.
I felt that Nog didn't have much reverence for the pursuit of profit. The way he said it seemed like he was almost contemptuous of it.
No, he's not committed to it. It's like a kid would repeat something that somebody said to him. He doesn't really believe it. But at the same time, this thing about Ferengi not wanting to do anything unless there was profit in it, it just kind of reinforced this problem I have where I'm still trying to find a character to root for. The Ferengi, forget it. I can understand why, as kind of a lovable villain sort of thing, you might cheer for them.
Yeah.
But I find no redeeming traits in them, at least yet. That's a struggle for me. Whereas on Next Gen, there are a lot of redeeming traits in characters. I miss that on this show. Who am I cheering for?
I think some of that may just come down to the much longer story arcs.
Yeah.
And I don't know if the writers yet even would have created the full start and end points for the Ferengi in this series.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. After Nog was yelling about Ferengi shouldn't be in school because there's no profit in it, Jake says, "Why are you getting mad at me?" And Nog is like, "Because you're a stupid human and I don't know why I bother with you." And he jumps to his feet and he stomps off. And now he's wearing a mustard colored sweater over an orange bodysuit. I dig it. It's very colorful. And Jake yells after him, "I'm stupid. You're the one not going to school." Which is
Ouch.
it's a pretty good dig.
That was a pretty harsh burn.
Oh, I hate to see Jake upset.
Yep.
Now we go back to Quark's, and the Nagus is talking about how profits are better than ever, and all the Ferengi are pounding on the table in celebration. Quark is sitting at the bar looking bored. He's still sitting there, but he's got his back to the table, and he stayed because in the last scene, the Nagus told him to stick around, but he's not participating in what's going on. He's just listening.
He did seem pretty surprised when the Nagus asked him to stay.
He did, yeah. So the Nagus is saying that it's getting difficult to find lucrative business opportunities in the Alpha Quadrant because of their reputation, which are lies, he says, told by their competitors. It's fake news.
Oh, very good.
He says they spread these vicious rumors that we aren't to be trusted.
Really?
Which is funny because when you look right in their rules of acquisition, it's all about lying and not being truthful and just taking profit at all turns. So I like how the rhetoric is even shared amongst themselves, even though they all know the truth. It's like are they lying to themselves or this is just part of the rhetoric?
I think this is completely part of their rhetoric and culture.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen it before, usually when Odo calls Quark out on something he's done, and Quark immediately goes into, "How could you impugn my character like that?"
Right. So the Nagus says now there's a whole new quadrant to expand into, and they're all excited by this because nobody knows them there, so they don't know that they can't trust them. And there's a whole new quadrant to explore and exploit.
It is amazing that they've reached a point that no one in the Alpha Quadrant trusts them. That is an impressive achievement.
That's right.
And reinforced by Grax saying, "Our word is our bond," until we decide to break it.
Yeah, exactly. But somehow they're still pretending like they're very open, honest businessmen.
Fake news.
It sounds so familiar. And one of them says, "But who shall lead us in this great endeavor?" They all shout, "The Grand Nagus." But he says he must decline the offer because he's old and he's not as greedy as he used to be.
That just made me laugh out loud.
That was funny.
The delivery of these lines is just perfect.
He says, "I've already chosen my successor and everybody at the table is assuming it's them." But he says the new Grand Nagus of the Gamma Quadrant is Quark. And they're outraged and they kick their chairs over and they leave. And Quark is, of course, stunned. And the Nagus says, "Congratulations. I know you'll do a wonderful job." And all of a sudden there's this weird, like, happy music that played. And Quark is standing there stroking his own ear in happiness.
This, I think, is where the show can bring in humor and not take itself too seriously.
There's a lot of humor in this episode. And I have to say that is normally one of my favorite things in Star Trek, especially once you get to know the characters better and the humor feels more natural. Now we go to Sisko's quarters and Jake is sadly stirring his oatmeal or gruel. That's what I wrote down.
The replicators need fixing again. It's gruel.
Yeah, poor Jake. His one friend is a bummer. Sisko asks if the oatmeal is lumpy and he says he's not hungry because of Nog. His father's pulled him out of school. And he says it's not fair because Nog can't even read and now school won't be any fun.
That sounds like a really strange thing. How could he not read?
Yeah.
How would he read the data pads?
How would you read contracts or anything? And how would you write an essay on ethics?
I'll be honest, that seemed like a bit of a stretch.
I mean, I guess you could just record it, just speaking.
True, voice recognition.
But you're right. There's a little bit of a flaw in the logic there, which we're going to address it again.
I guess you could do everything with text to speech.
Yeah.
I expect it's Ferengi culture. If you want to read, you'd have to learn it yourself.
Yeah. How would they learn to read?
Pay someone to teach you, I expect.
I mean, we know Quark can read. Because he's reading a screen in one of the other episodes.
He probably hired someone to teach him. I expect most things in Ferengi culture come down to having to pay someone.
What you can afford to do. It's not so much a culture of spending as it is a culture of hoarding, accumulating.
They don't seem to be too shy of investing in things, but I guess they would want to spend as little as possible to get maximum return.
And only for gain, right? Sisko says you can still see Nog after school. And Jake says, probably not after this fight that they had. And Jake in this scene, he's got this perfect little angelic face. He's quite adorable. I mean, he's really the only redeeming character on the show. I can imagine that you would pretty much give that little face whatever he wanted. It's just so sweet. He says that Nog says humans and Ferengi can't get along. And Sisko says that's pretty much true. Then Jake points out that he's always saying we should make friends with other cultures. It's so annoying when your kids throw your lessons back in your face.
I thought this was a really strange statement coming from Sisko. It doesn't seem very Federation. Surely they would continue to try.
Well, but he does say that our values are different and we've never been able to form a common bond. He doesn't say that it's impossible. He just says that we've never been able to form one yet.
I still think this is odd because it's hitting some of the basics of the Federation. I mean, lots of races have very little actually in common. I mean, look at Klingons and Vulcans.
Yeah.
Perhaps this is tying into some of Sisko's own biases, that the Ferengi are just like this. I don't have time to deal with it. It's not something that's part of my current mission. I just deal with the way things are and move on.
Well, the Ferengi are not in the Federation, right?
No.
And I think you could look at it like maybe they are viewed as a little bit less evolved because of their view of women. They only want to profit. And also they're very insular. They stick to themselves.
Yeah.
They only trust each other. They don't trust anybody outside of their species.
Or taller than them.
Which is one of the rules of acquisition. But I mean, if you look at it from that perspective,
Yeah.
if you read those rules of acquisition and you looked at that as their base of their culture and the way that they operate, it is pretty much saying they're only going to trust each other and they're not going to be a part of any other kind of federation.
That's interesting. Perhaps this is also part of Sisko's pragmatism. He knows what the Ferengi are like, and it's not part of his mission, so he deals with them the way they are.
Maybe. Or it's as simple as he would rather not encourage the friendship with Nog. And so he's feeding into this thing a little bit that, maybe you guys can't be friends.
Oh, so this may be a strategic move by Sisko, rather than him stating truly what he believes. I
mean, he's not saying something untruthful. He's just saying, we've never been able to form a common bond.
So he's deliberately focusing on the negative. I didn't think of that.
Now Quark is walking through the promenade and he's wearing the purple Nagus robe and he's carrying the Ferengi headed staff.
Yes.
And he's walking like he's in a parade and waving at onlookers. And one of the Ferengi named Grawl starts groveling after him and running after him. And he says, I'll protect you from the others. They're all jealous. And that makes Quark a little nervous as he realizes, oh, somebody might actually be out to get me or after my job. It's like, maybe this isn't as great as I thought it would be.
Of all people, you'd think Quark would be aware of what Ferengi are like.
Yes, but I think they're also very susceptible to being buttered up.
Yeah.
People sort of groveling at them. And so I think his head got a little swelled, which is a funny thing to say about a Ferengi with a giant head. But I think he got a little ahead of himself of how important I am. Look how great I am. And then it took someone else to come along and remind him, oh, wait, somebody might try to stab me in the back.
Yeah. I mean, Grawl does make a direct threat against Quark.
Yeah.
I think it speaks to how good Grand Nagus Zek must have been in holding on to that role. Seeing as culturally, the Ferengi don't seem terribly worried about killing the Grand Nagus. Although probably getting caught is their biggest worry.
Yes.
And most importantly in this scene, we see Morn walk left to right in the background.
I'm not sure why it's most importantly, but okay, good to know.
I mean, he's everywhere on the station because he's one of the prophets.
He is not.
Absolutely is.
Now we go to an extremely dark room, and the guy who used to be the Nagus is sitting in a recliner. It looked like he was reading, and the giant is there, and he pours him a drink, and it looks like there's a tray of Peeps next to him. So he's got his candies, and he's got his drink. Quark comes running in saying he's in trouble, and the Nagus is like, don't call me Nagus, I'm Zek. You're the Nagus. And he's like, where should I go on vacation? So what he's looking at, I guess what I couldn't see is he's reading a travel brochure pad or something as he's trying to plan his vacation because he says he hasn't had one in 85 years. Quark says, Grawl just threatened my life. And Zek says, well, he's the first, but he won't be the last. And he says, to survive, you must surround yourself with loyal men, but not too loyal because you can't trust anyone who places your prosperity above his own. And then he says, when in doubt, just be ruthless. And Quark's like, oh, I can do that.
I feel that advice was a little generic.
Yeah, it's generic advice, but if you think about how they're pretty much driven by those written rules of acquisition, it would make sense that they're going to sort of talk in platitudes.
Yeah.
So then Zek kind of freezes, and I thought, did he just fall asleep? And then the giant reached down and checked him, and he's like, no, apparently he's dead. And Quark's like, I didn't do it. I didn't do anything.
Yeah, exactly the reaction we'd expect from Quark.
Then we go to what appears to be a memorial service, and we're in Quark's again because there's only 2 rooms. And one of the Ferengi is looking at some green powder in a little clear container, and he's negotiating with Krax over the price. Quark asks Rom if he'll be his bodyguard, and he's drinking a glass of water in this scene, and it was really strange and awkward because you don't see that very often. Rom says he thought that Quark was going to be busy as the Nagus, and so that Rom would take over running the bar. And this is when you find out why Quark is drinking water, because he does a spit take and he spits the water out everywhere, and he just like laughs uproariously.
Yeah. He's extremely demeaning to Rom in this scene. He just laughs his head off.
Yes, and Rom just stomps off. And Odo kind of sneaks up behind Quark. I don't know if you noticed this, but Odo's makeup is very different in this episode than it has been in the first 9. It's a lot smoother.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
Yeah, it's definitely evolved at this point. And Odo says, not exactly overcome by grief, are you? And Quark says, this is a private funeral.
Ferengi only.
Which, why is it private again in Quark's? Odo announces to everyone that when someone dies on the station, questions must be asked. Crack says his father died of a massive infection to the tympanic membrane. I wrote it down because I'm like, tympanic? Isn't that a drum? So I looked it up because I needed to know what that was. And it's a real thing. It's the membrane forming part of the organ of hearing, which vibrates in response to sound waves. And that would probably be a very painful condition when your head is all ear.
Right. Considering the size of their ears, any infection is probably fatal.
Yeah, well, it was. Odo says he's going to have Bashir examine the body, and the Ferengi all laugh because the containers of green dust are Zek. Crack says when a Ferengi of this stature dies, he's sold as a prize collectible. And Odo says, oh, how touching.
Can you just totally see that as part of Ferengi culture, collecting the ashes of famous dead Ferengi?
Oh, yeah.
But being Ferengi, wouldn't they be counterfeiting these things all the time? You'd never know if you had a real one.
Yeah, I guess you got to be able to do some kind of DNA check on it. It's funny because it's just like another way to profit on a family member.
Oh, yeah.
Once they're dead, I'm going to sell off bits of you. Now we go to the promenade and 2 NPCs are carrying some kind of metal cylinder. And we see 2 sets of boots hanging down from the second level. One is a very natty brown leather boot, and the other is a green boot that has a slightly higher heel and looks like something that maybe Peter Pan would wear as part of a stage production. I don't know if you noticed that, but it was like, whoa, that is peculiar. Very costumey.
You're doing the fashion analysis this episode.
Yeah, I'm very interested in the shoes and in the costumes. Yeah, for sure. Anyway, it's Jake and Nog, and they're hanging out again, and they're sort of grumbling at each other. Both of their fathers say Ferengis and humans have nothing to talk about, and then they decide, which is really cute, they decide that they should still be friends, and they shake hands, and Jake says that he's got a great idea, and they run off together.
I thought this scene was very Star Trek. We saw a younger generation not conforming to social norms. They're not letting cultural baggage and history get in the way of their friendship.
Yeah, that's interesting. I guess these two sort of embody Star Trek more than everybody else in this episode.
Yes, yeah, very much.
Then we go back to the funeral, and Odo is asking Quark what it means exactly to be the Grand Nagus. And Quark says it means from now on, if you want to speak to me, you must make an appointment with Rom. Don't be ludicrous, Odo says.
Odo is just not impressed with his new status.
No, he was never going to be. Quark says it's also customary to show respect by kissing his scepter, and he holds up the big plastic Ferengi head, and Odo just scoffs and leaves.
Yeah.
Then a coin rattles by on the floor, and Quark steps on it, and he looks around to see if anyone else noticed that. And then we see behind him a little brown drone floating by, and they play that quirky, goofy music again, which is like some kind of 80s sitcom music. And Quark ducks to pick up the coin, and the drone flies right over him, hits the wall, and explodes.
A very lucky escape.
Yes.
I like this because it's another piece of science fiction that's become reality. I mean, we have mini drones today that look very much like this. I mean, they're not as quiet because they don't have anti-grav, obviously. Yeah. But they do look very much like this.
That's true. After the ad break, Miles, Odo, and Sisko are examining the explosion site, and Miles says the discoloration around the impact perimeter indicates this was a Ferengi locator bomb. They're designed to lock onto the target's pheromones, or as Odo says, their body odor, which, gross. Bashir comes in to say that Quark is shaken up and he's fine, and Sisko tells Odo it's time for a chat with the Grand Nagus, and they head out of Quark's, and as they step out, Sisko looks up to the second level of the promenade, and he sees Jake and Nog running and laughing together. And he sighs like, oh, well.
Yeah, Sisko doesn't look thrilled at the friends being back together.
Now we go to medical. And Odo is asking Quark to get it into his twisted little brain that they're trying to save his life. But Quark says, you are interfering in Ferengi affairs. Listen here, Quark, Sisko says. And Rom pokes his head into the picture and says, Grand Nagus, Quark.
Nice.
And Sisko is so irked. He says, you are lucky the bomb missed you. Next time you won't be so lucky. Quark then gets up and Rom puts the purple robe thing over him. Odo asks who would benefit the most from his death. And Quark figures Krax, who was Nagus's son. And he says because he would become Nagus if Quark were killed. I don't know why. I don't know why he would be next in line.
Perhaps as he was in the shadow of Zek for such a long time and did a lot of arranging, he has a lot of influence and could sway whatever Ferengi council to make him the next Nagus.
He has the most experience. He's been the vice Nagus.
Yeah, right.
Well, Rom says, yeah, Krax may be next in line, but Grawl threatened you. And then Quark growls at Rom for revealing this information.
Shouldn't he hiss?
That's what I thought. He said all of the Ferengi were at the funeral anyway, so they couldn't have done it. And then they ask about Zek's bodyguard, the giant, and they say that his name is Mehardu, which looks like, if you say it fast, is my hairdo. And he wasn't at the funeral, and Odo finds this very odd.
Yeah, Odo points out how Hupyrian servants are very devoted to their employers.
Right.
Yeah, he's figuring something's up.
Right. Then we go to the Sisko quarters. And Jake is drinking more OJ. This is a theme with him. Sisko comes in and says, you were out after midnight last night. And Jake says, was I? I don't think I was allowed out after midnight at the age of 14.
He's 14 on a rundown space station.
Yeah, in a very dangerous place filled with people that Sisko doesn't necessarily know. It's not like it's a starship. Maybe Sisko asked the computer where he was, so wasn't worried because he always knows where he is.
Jake's being read the riot act here.
Very nicely, though. Jake says he was with Nog, but they weren't doing anything wrong, which pretty much always means they were doing something wrong.
If it's the Ferengi definition of nothing wrong, I'd be worried.
Yeah. And then Sisko says, well, then you can tell me all about it. And Jake says, no, it's private. It's like, 14-year-olds shouldn't have private meetings after midnight.
I thought it seemed a bit odd that Sisko just let this go without pushing it further.
Yeah. Very suspicious. Then Jake says he has to go to school, and Sisko tells him he'd better be home for dinner. And then he leaves for school, and Sisko looks, I would say, a little flummoxed. He wants to let Jake be his own person, but Ferengi are idiots, and he doesn't know what's going on with him and Nog.
I think this goes back to that conversation with Miles earlier, where he doesn't want to force Jake into making a choice about his friendship with Nog.
Yes. Now we go to a very dark room. There's something about the Ferengi in very dark rooms.
They think it makes them look cooler.
Maybe. One of the Ferengi is talking to Quark, and he says he's done all he can in the field of gouge mining, and he wants to introduce synth ale to the Gamma Quadrant. Rom and Krax are kind of standing behind this guy. Quark says that's a very lucrative opportunity. He's sitting at his desk, and he's stroking something. It looks like a piece of driftwood. Did you notice this? But then when he set it on his desk, it moves.
Yeah, it's some kind of weird
But
pet.
it doesn't look like anything.
It looked like something a Bond villain would have.
Yes, it was. So Quark tells Nava, that's the Ferengi he's talking to, that he didn't offer him support when he was named Nagus. But the guy says, but now I'll split this opportunity with you 50-50. And Quark, of course, being greedy, says, well, in that case, I hope they like synthahol in the Gamma Quadrant. And the guy runs out all excited, kissing the Ferengi staff on the head.
Once again, I'll point out, I don't think Quark is as good a businessman as he thinks he is. I mean, he seems to think he's a big player, but he agreed to that deal really quickly.
Yes.
He's so easily buttered up.
Which is maybe a failing of all Ferengi. I don't know. We know Quark better than pretty much all of them. Krax says that was a smart deal, and Quark says he has a knack for it. It's like, uh-oh. Cockiness always means you're in for something bad to happen.
For sure.
He says he's going to go to the bar to check on the receipts, and he leaves. And then Krax says to Rom, if he keeps handing out these lucrative opportunities, he's going to be very popular. And Rom says, well, then we'll have to try something more reliable than a locator bomb. Oh,
boom.
Rom trying to kill his own brother.
And the big reveal.
Yes.
I thought that happened kind of early.
Well, we're 30 some minutes into this episode, so not too early.
I thought they would have kept us hanging right to the end.
That's true.
Rom seems very bloodthirsty here.
Yeah.
I'm going to speculate that Rom hasn't been shown as a very strong character to this point, and what we're seeing is Grax manipulating him into doing this.
I definitely think that's what happened. It was clear that Krax was expecting to get the job of Nagus, and he sees Rom as a way to get what he wants. Well, they've become fast friends, apparently. In this scene, Rom says that we need something that won't fail to kill my dear brother, and then Krax really laughs and pats him on the back. Now we go to the Sisko quarters again, and Sisko is sitting at the dinner table by himself, so Jake didn't make it home for dinner, and he's playing with a baseball very angrily. And then Dax arrives and says she was going to ask if he wanted to play chess, but sees he's having dinner. And Sisko's like, well, not really. I've been waiting half an hour for Jake. Dax comes in saying dinner looks delicious. And then she pulls the chair out from under the table and she turns it around and she sits backwards on it like she's Riker. Are they trying to make sure that I know she's a dude? Why would she inherit male tendencies like that if the Trill is genderless? I really found that detail annoying.
Do you think it could be because she met Riker at some point and wanted to be cool like him?
Maybe she wanted to be cool like Riker. Ooh, he's cool. I'm going to sit backwards in the chair. So Sisko says he doesn't know how he's going to survive Jake's adolescence. Barely survived his own. Dax says to talk to him because children need boundaries. She says she was a mother 3 times and a father twice. And she says she wasn't a great mother or father, so maybe her advice isn't great. But she says she'd go find Jake and bring him home to eat his dinner.
That was a funny scene. Oh, I was a bad parent.
That was great.
I was giving us some more insight into the character of Dax as well.
Yeah.
The symbiont would have the memory of the hosts, who were all bad parents, apparently. Now, this makes me wonder how strange Trill culture is, because the symbiont that was your mother could still be alive in another host.
Yeah.
That could have all the memories of you growing up as a child, so was like your mother, but wasn't.
You're right. That's really weird. The whole thing is very strange. I guess if you think about it, there's another person out there who has all the memories of your parent. And they seem to sort of cut people off when they change hosts. And also, in some ways, your parent in that scenario is going to outlive you by eons.
Yeah, exactly.
That's hard to get your head around.
I guess there's a side of it if they don't look like your mother or father.
It doesn't feel like they're your parent.
Exactly.
Yeah. Sisko then asks the computer where Jake is, and he's in Cargo Bay 14. So he heads out. And as he leaves, Dax helps herself to their dinner sitting on the table. I like that scene.
I wouldn't want to miss out on a really good stew.
No, that stew looks quite delicious. Okay, so we go to Cargo Bay 14. And of course, we learned that angelic Jake is teaching Nog how to read. Sisko sneaks in and sees this, and then he sneaks back out unseen.
Oh, I thought this was a really touching scene and very Star Trek.
Yeah.
These two are starting to bridge that gap between humanity and the Ferengi, and it's based on their friendship.
Yeah. They're doing a thing that their father said couldn't be done, or that, other grown-ups couldn't make happen.
Yeah.
They're just ignoring that because really they're all each other has. But I do wonder, how would the universal translator be working here? Is he teaching Nog to read in English?
I don't have an answer for that.
I thought the whole thing seemed a little complicated for a 14-year-old to teach another person how to read. But I'm willing to suspend my disbelief because Jake is just so pure and adorable. I mean, I'm hoping that what's happening is Jake is sort of bringing the lessons that he's getting in school to Nog.
Oh, that's a really good point. I didn't consider that.
Yeah.
Could be.
Because I don't know how, it's not like Jake's going to develop a curriculum to teach his friend how to read. That seems like a step too far, but it's certainly possible that he's taking the things that he's learning and just showing him. And maybe Nog is just smart enough to pick up the language by learning these lessons and, with Jake helping him. I don't know. Either way, I think if you dig too deeply into a lot of stuff, you can untangle it, right? And pick it apart. But I just think it's just a very sweet part of the story.
Yeah. I mean, it works as a scene to emphasize a point that was made earlier.
Yeah. Rom is now dressing Quark, and Quark is saying that he's surprised. He didn't know that Zek had opened negotiations with someone in the Gamma Quadrant. And Crack says there is a lucrative opportunity there that he'll get to close. So as he's leaving the room, Rom asks about the bar again. And he says, "You have so much and I have so little." And Quark says, "Which is exactly how it was meant to be." Uh-oh, that's not helping his cause.
Quark is just being a real jerk to Rom.
This is a new low. So Rom's like, fine, let's go. Then we're on the promenade, and Odo is keeping an eye on the giant bodyguard guy. Quark enters the promenade with Rom, and Crack's running behind him, and they're both kind of buttering him up. And Quark says he really wants to take a Dabo girl with him when he goes to the Gamma Quadrant, because he says it will increase his prestige somehow. And Cracks and Rom are like, oh my God, no, you can't do that. And they keep trying to tell him that, oh no, he's so great on his own. He's imposing. He doesn't need anyone else. And Quark, of course, completely eats it up. And then they play that goofy music again. And he's like, fine, okay, I won't. I'll just go myself. And so then they head off. Meanwhile, Odo is following the giant guy, and the giant goes through some locked doors, like an airlock door.
Yeah, it's an airlock.
I would think that Odo could not go through an airtight seal.
I'm glad you bring that up.
Because then he shrinks down and comes up on the other side.
Yes. The whole point of an airlock is there aren't any holes.
Mhm.
It's airtight.
Yes.
Unless, and I have a theory about this, when Odo shapeshifts, he also has the ability to move through objects at a subatomic level.
Like he can become a part of the thing and then come out the other side.
Yeah, exactly.
We have not established that in any way so far on this show.
That has never stopped me from speculating before.
I have my doubts about this part of the story. I don't know. That's my analysis. I don't like it.
That is your prerogative.
Also, Rom and Krax are escorting Quark into an airlock. And when Quark goes in, they shut the door. And Quark realizes there's no ship there. It's like when you're at a gate and you're looking to see if your airplane is there. And you look down through the window and there's no plane there. So he looks out, he's like, no, there must be a mistake. And then he realizes he's been locked in. And Krax says, you've been voted out of office.
Wait, they're a democracy?
And then the two of them start talking to each other, about how they've got him in there and ha ha ha. And they're cackling. And I'm like, just own the plan and vent him. If you're going to vent him, vent him. Stop talking about it. It's like a whole Bond thing, right? Just if you're going to kill him, just kill him. And Rom says, oh, Rom's is a good name for a bar. And oh my gosh.
I do think gloating is part of Ferengi culture. That's what you're seeing here.
Gloating. Oh.
I think that's a very Ferengi thing.
Okay. At the same time, Quark does his usual thing, which he immediately starts groveling. He starts begging to be let out. And the other two are like, ha ha, whatever. Krax tells Rom to press the button and vent him, but he moves his hand towards the button, but he doesn't quite push it. And he keeps moving his hand toward it. And I thought he was going to press the button to release him, but he doesn't. And just then you hear, release him from behind. And Odo comes running in and lets Quark out of the airlock. And he says, oh, I guess you needed my help after all. And behind them now is the old Nagus, who is alive and well, and the giant bodyguard.
Big reveal, the Nagus is still alive.
But also, the point that I kind of missed there was when Odo runs in and releases him, he presses a different button. So Rom's hand was not going to the release button. It was going to the vent button. He just hadn't pressed it yet. So he was really trying to convince himself to do it. And he just hadn't done it yet.
Did you notice there how Krax was basically getting Rom to do the dirty work?
Oh, yes, for sure.
I bet that's another Ferengi thing, getting somebody else to do the dirty work so you can stand there and say, oh, I didn't do it. It's nothing to do with me.
Yeah, because he could have pressed the button.
Also, I think we see here that Rom isn't quite as Ferengi as the others.
Yeah.
I mean, like returning the money at the bar earlier.
Yeah.
And having Quark in the airlock, he didn't immediately vent him just to get the bar.
I wonder if Quark would have.
Yeah, I think that's the big difference between the two brothers.
Quark is more of a Ferengi.
Yes, but I don't think he's a terribly good Ferengi either.
Are any of them that good? I mean...
Oh, I mean good in Ferengi terms, not good as in decent people.
Well, I guess what I mean is when you have no moral compass and all you really have are these sort of basic rules of acquisition, which you could interpret any way you want, and you're susceptible to being buttered up and all you think about is profit, I don't think you're really going to evolve that well as a being.
Ah, gotcha.
So I don't think you're ever going to be that smart because you're not allowing other people, other cultures, other ways of thinking to help you evolve. You're very stuck in your own way. I question that they would have even ever gotten to warp capability with those attitudes, but hey, it's Star Trek, so okay.
That is actually addressed later.
Is it? Did they steal it? It's addressed in Deep Space Nine?
It is addressed in an episode of Deep Space Nine.
Okay, then don't tell me. No spoilers. But okay, that's good. I'd like to hear that. So the old Nagus said he faked his death as a test to see if Krax was ready to take his place, and he failed miserably. This is so awful. He calls him a fool.
Again, we're seeing the contrast between Sisko and the Nagus with their sons.
Bad parenting leads to bad kids. I mean, if you can't trust your parent, are you going to be trustworthy?
Did you notice Odo in this?
No.
After he releases Quark, he just walks off screen. It's like, Odo, you just witnessed an attempted murder.
That's true. He didn't do anything about it. Maybe he didn't really think they were going to do it. I don't know.
Perhaps he looked at it as, it's just Ferengi being Ferengi.
Well, he may have made a deal with the Nagus.
Ah.
Just saying, hey, that kid's your problem now.
Good point. You could see the Nagus cutting a deal.
Yeah. So as they're walking away from this now, the old Nagus calls his son a fool, saying he should have been in the bar gathering information. Like he should have spent time at Quark's gathering info about the Gamma Quadrant because it's sort of a central location where all of these different people are going to be coming through. And he feels like he could have learned a lot doing that. He tells him he's terrible and he sends him back to the ship.
I believe he said the bar is the key to everything.
Yeah. after he talks to Krax and sends him away, he says, it's like talking to a Klingon. What? I'm not sure what he meant. Now we go to Quark's, and Quark is giving the scepter back to the Nagus. And the Nagus says he'll let Quark know if he hears of any profitable Gamma Quadrant jobs. He says maybe one day he'll come back and buy the bar from him. And then he cackles and leaves.
I think he likes to pick on Quark.
That's right. Well, they have an evil sense of humor, I think, the Ferengi.
The Nagus, for sure.
Well, Quark has no sense of humor. So Rom is walking by at this moment, and he asks Quark for his forgiveness, but Quark says he never knew he had the lobes to do something like that. Such wonderful treachery deserves a reward. I'm going to make you assistant manager of policy and clientele. And Rom's like, what does that mean? And Quark goes, I don't know, I just made it up. And then he says he'll buy him a drink. That was pretty cute.
That was kind of funny. But the Ferengi are still kind of monsters.
Yeah. Now we go out to the promenade, and Jake and Nog are at that giant popsicle stand. Do you remember that from back, I think it was episode 1?
Yes, where Rom didn't want to talk to him.
And because we had the entire last episode where nobody was creeping on women, and we've had an entire episode here of nobody creeping on women, we can't go too long without it. So then a woman walks by, a Vulcan, 2 of them turn around and they drool over her, and she kind of looks back at them and does this model walk away.
Just going to point out, they're teenage boys.
Yes. Although, what's she doing? So then Sisko approaches, and that's when I noticed he's standing below what looks like a giant fish skeleton, but is some kind of alien or artwork.
The one we saw earlier.
Exactly. And Jake goes over to his dad, and Sisko hugs him and kisses him on the head, saying he's a great boy. And Jake is all embarrassed. And then he tells him to go back to his friend. And then that was the end.
Good dad move. Embarrass him in front of his friends.
It was a very heartwarming moment. It made me cry. It was just adorable.
I think that was a great little closing scene to reinforce the difference between the negative in the Nagus and his son and the positive in Sisko and Jake.
I feel like a dope that I did not even pick up on these parallels that you're talking about between the father-son relationship that are so different. And maybe I didn't pick it up because they are so different. But maybe the lesson of the episode is if you just give enough love to your kid and you give them enough space, that will come back to you as a positive thing. Whereas on the other side with the Ferengi, he didn't give anything to his kid. Instead, he was just testing him and trying to groom him to be I want to say bloodthirsty, but that's not the right word. It's because it's just greed. Just raising someone to be greedy and not care about you or anyone else, then they're not necessarily going to evolve in the way that you would want them to.
Even saying that, you have to look at the Nagus was testing his son to see whether he was ready to take the role.
Yeah.
So it's not quite completely negative.
True. That's true.
But then the way he was doing it did seem kind of harsh.
Yeah. Well, it's a harsh job in a harsh world.
Yeah.
And also he recognized, I mean, if you're really going to overanalyze, he recognized that the Ferengi were not going to go much farther in the Alpha Quadrant. So it was the dawn of a new day to take them into the Gamma Quadrant.
Yeah, he wanted to maintain their culture and how they behave.
Right.
So he was quite far-sighted in that respect.
Yeah, he seems maybe the smartest of the Ferengi, which is probably why he has that job.
We never saw anybody really try to stroke his ego.
No, well, except for when they're all sitting at the conference table saying, who's going to take us into the Gamma Quadrant? Oh, it's going to be you, Grand Nagus. But it didn't work on him. But they were still trying.
Yeah, it's part of their culture, but it didn't work because he had his own agenda that he needed to complete. And I think that's why he's been the Nagus for so long. He's not easily
manipulated, yeah.
He doesn't have the failings Ferengis typically have.
Well, that makes sense. Okay, we have come to the end of this episode. Do you have any other over-analysis?
I think we covered everything, but I do have a few bullet point takeaways. 1, can Odo pass through solid objects?
Yeah, we need to know that.
2, is the importance of the Nagus a cultural thing? Is it because of business savvy, or is it because of intimidation?
So, what is the heart of his power?
Yes, exactly that. And 3, did the Ferengi steal any silverware?
And was it Quark's birthday?
Yes, that could be the 4th thing. Was it indeed Quark's birthday?
That's it?
That's all.
So let's move to women in the future. I actually have 0 notes written under my women in the future analysis. And that's because there were not a lot of women in this episode. Obviously, Dax had the funny line about Quark's birthday, and Kira had just a couple of lines.
And we did learn more about Dax.
Yeah, we heard about her being both a mother and a father and not being great at either job, which I would then question how responsible it is to keep having kids if you're not good at it.
But trills do say they evolve over time.
I see. And then this is so superficial and I'm embarrassed. But the thing that bugged me the most is when she turned the chair around and sat down, because that is not happening.
She just wanted to be cool like Riker.
I think that's all I have to say on this topic this time, which is shocking.
Wow.
There just weren't any women really in this episode, so it's hard to say much about it. Okay, so I think that's it for Women in the Future. Let's go on to the rating. Thumbs up, thumbs down, or thumbs neutral. What is your rating?
I am going with thumbs up. It was a good episode. I enjoyed the themes in it, and it had a lot of humor.
Okay. As is often the case, I arrive at this point not really sure what rating I want to give it. I don't generally even think about that when I'm watching it, and I certainly don't put it in my notes. But there were some things I loved in this episode, and one of them is Sisko's relationship with Jake. What I love about it is how it's not a stereotype and it's not obvious. I find it very real and very touching, and I like that a lot. And I also think Jake is my new favorite character. It's that little angelic face of his, and of course, he was such a great kid in this episode. You couldn't ask for a kid that great. He's too cute. Hopefully, we don't keep him quite so perfect. That tends to be less and less interesting. So I like that. And I like the little bit of humor, because that's really one of my favorite things in Star Trek are those little injections of humor. So I liked all those things. But here are the things that I didn't like. And probably the main problem I have is I don't like the Ferengi. I have never liked them. They were introduced in Next Gen early on to be the big villains, but they ended up kind of being a joke. So they didn't really use them, I think, as heavily as they had planned. So I don't like the Ferengi, I guess, overall as characters. And this was a very Ferengi heavy episode. So it was tough for me to kind of get past that. And this was maybe the most important part of the episode, was the Ferengi-ness of it.
Yeah.
Oh, and I also forgot the other thing I really liked was how much purple was in this episode. I'm bordering on. There was stuff in the episode I loved and stuff in this episode that I was like, ugh. But I think I'm going to give it a very tentative thumbs up because of the positives. And I felt like a lot of things were moving in the right direction of how I would end up liking it. I would just like fewer Ferengi.
Everything but the Ferengi. So you share Sisko's view of them.
Yeah, where I can't find a common bond between me and the Ferengi. Yes, I guess I share that opinion with him. That's it for season 1, episode 10. Come back next week for episode 11. In the meantime, if you'd like to tell us your own overanalysis of this or any episode, or if you just want to say something nice, please email us at rebingeit@gmail.com or tweet us at rebingeit. Also, check us out on talkthroughmedia.com. You can leave us feedback there, and you can also listen to all of our other awesome podcasts.
Thanks for joining us on the Rebinge Deep Space Nine podcast.
That's it for me.
And that's it from me.